Good morning, you've got a packed catch-up today, 25 videos from the last 25 hours. Topics range from a major Chinese AI model shaking up the frontier, to Linux gaming, iPad leaks, electric vehicles, FPGA engineering, affordable gaming hardware, and even a live-action God of War production disaster. Let's get into it. The big story today, and honestly maybe the big story of the week, is Kimi K3 from China's Moonshot AI, and Wee's Roth was genuinely shaken by it. He opened his video with "Today is the day China erased America's AI lead." And while that's dramatic framing, he actually earned it. Kimi K3 has taken the #1 spot on the front-end code arena benchmark, beating Claude Fable 5, and Wee's argument is that this isn't just another cheap Chinese model. It's a real frontier model with a genuinely different design philosophy. The core insight is K3's agentic visual loop. It builds something, takes a screenshot, evaluates the result, identifies problems, and keeps iterating until satisfied. Wees has been saying for years that being able to see what you're building and course correct is transformative, and K3 is the first model he's seen actually nail it. The other headline was wild. K3 autonomously designed a chip in 48 hours using only open-source EDA tools, no proprietary software, no human intervention. The chip was designed to run a miniaturized version of itself. Wees is careful to contextualize this. The chip specs are academic grade, not competitive with commercial silicon, more like a strong university capstone project. But the point isn't the chip specs. It's that an AI worked for 2 days straight, used only free tools, and produced functional hardware specs for a smaller copy of itself. That news knocked roughly $6.5 billion off the valuations of 2 unnamed semiconductor companies. We's also spent time on what he reads as a deliberate philosophical attack on Anthropic. Moonshot never names Anthropic directly, but they explicitly market K3 as available for AI-assisted AI research and recursive self-improvement use cases, everything Anthropic has been vocal about preventing competitors from doing. We's put it bluntly, Anthropic models, in his words, treat you a little bit like a war criminal if you even hint at doing any work of this kind. While K3 engages readily with GPU kernel optimization, compiler work, and low-level systems tasks. On the kernel benchmark, K3 performed competitively with Fable 5, though We's noted the important caveat that Fable likely refused some prompts and fell back to Opus 4.8, which Moonshot themselves acknowledged in their evaluation notes. We's ran a bunch of DMOS, and this is where he got visibly excited. Through the Kimi COM browser interface, not the API, he built a 3D first-person subway shooter with Matrix-style bullet time, enemies on both sides, trains going past, a reload mechanic, and the risk of getting crushed against a wall. The model took dozens of autonomous screenshots during development, fixing texture tiling, checking train movement, verifying flash effects. He says the bullet time actually feels good. He also built a ring-world driving game at nighttime, notoriously hard for AI, and K3 nailed the ring-shaped course geometry on the first attempt, even self-correcting an overbloomed scene it identified independently. He built a SimCity 2 clone with a full economic engine, an Elder Scrolls-style 2D RPG with race selection and a quest system, a sailing game, and a Western open-world driving game. Here's the important caveat We's kept coming back to. His early tests through the API and CLI tool, Kimi Code, which he keeps calling KFC, were underwhelming. He was confused, kept double-checking he was using the right model at max reasoning effort. The answer turned out to be that the browser interface has a fully developed agentic harness that takes screenshots and iterates, while the API strips that out. So if you test K3 through the API and wonder what all the fuss is about, that's why. On the open-source front, Moonshot plans to release full model weights within weeks. Wees estimates you'd need something like a 5 terabyte drive just to store them. You couldn't run this at home. It would require millions of dollars of NVIDIA GPUs, but anyone who downloads the weights preserves access permanently. Once they're out, the model can't be recalled, which raises dual-use concerns since K3 has no strong Western-style safety guardrails, though it does censor content sensitive to Chinese political preferences. We's closed on geopolitics. David Sachs posted that K3 taking #1 on a frontier coding benchmark is concerning and argued that U.S. regulatory overreach, state-level bans, proposed federal pre-approval for frontier models, is how America loses the AI race. We personally finds calls to pause AI development logically untenable. If the U.S. shuts down its labs, China doesn't necessarily follow, and the weights already being distributed mean capabilities can't be recalled. He ended on an idealistic note, wishing the actual researchers, not politicians, could lead the global conversation, saying most of the researchers he observes seem motivated by doing the right thing rather than greed. The founder of Moonshot AI, by the way, is Jilin Yang, a PhD student of Rus Salakutdinov at Carnegie Mellon, formerly VP of Research at Meta and Director of AI at Apple, who called Yang absolutely brilliant. Matthew Berman also covered Kimi K3, filming outside in 100-degree heat, which he kept referencing with good humor, and he brought a more analytically skeptical lens to the same story. He called it a potential next DeepSeek moment, but repeatedly pulled back from pure hype. His headline number: on Arena AI's front-end development benchmark, K3 sits at #1 with 76%, while Claude Sonnet Fable 5 sits at 63%, and GPT 5.6 is second. He's explicit that 76 versus 63 is not a narrow margin. The specs he emphasized: 2.8 trillion parameters, making it the largest open-source model released to date, with a 1 million token context window, designed for long-horizon coding, knowledge work, and reasoning. He contrasted it with Thinking Machine's best open-source model at 975 billion parameters, calling it a pale comparison. The demo video Moonshot released was itself edited by K3, showing it building what Berman described as Red Dead Redemption-style 3D environments with real-time reflections and a dynamic day-night cycle. He then ran his own Rubik's Cube test at the start of filming, kicked it off, filmed the whole video, and revealed the result at the end. The cube came back with correct reflections, working scramble, and a working solve animation. He said it absolutely crushes it. On pricing, the listed rate is $3 per million input tokens and $15 per million output tokens, roughly half the price of GPT 5.6 Sol. But here's where Berman got careful. He immediately pointed out that intelligence density matters. If the model uses twice as many tokens to complete the same task, the effective cost is the same. He used the DeepSWE benchmark to make this concrete, his current favorite benchmark, because he says it accurately reflects real-world model quality. On that test, K3 Max and GPT 5.6 Sol are both clustered around $4.70 average cost per task at similar completion rates. Effectively the same price performance. Half the token price, twice the tokens, netting to parity. He also highlighted the Versal CEO Guillermo Rocha's benchmark on Next.org. K3 is #1 there too, at a 92% success rate, the first time an open model has led all proprietary ones on a comprehensive web engineering benchmark. And on a writing benchmark, K3 jumped from 21st place all the way to #1 at 2840 ELEW, at about 25 cents per script, 5 times cheaper than the model it displaced. Berman raised 2 important caveats. First, many benchmarks are saturated and may not reflect real-world capability. Second, Anthropic has accused Moonshot of distillation attacking, essentially using Anthropic's model outputs to train K3, meaning the model may have learned partly from scraped Anthropic data. Berman acknowledged that's Anthropic's claim, and the degree of impact is unknown. His broader argument was that US labs are still well ahead in a way benchmarks don't capture. Chinese labs release models the moment training finishes. US closed-source labs finish training months earlier and spend that time on safety evaluations, post-training refinement, and RLHF. He cited Anthropic's Mythos model, which he says existed internally in January but wasn't publicly released for 5 months. His estimate? Anthropic is likely 8 to 10 months ahead of the open-source frontier in actual capability, and GPT-6 is probably already baked and being internally tested at OpenAI right now. His strategic flag for enterprise buyers. If US enterprise infrastructure gets built on Chinese open-source models, and those models become optimized for Chinese chips, the US becomes dependent on Chinese hardware. That's the risk he keeps coming back to. DIY Smart Code also covered Kimi K3 and added some technical architecture detail worth knowing. The presenter was energetic and framed it as a significant historical moment, and the leaderboard story they focused on was genuinely dramatic. The previous moonshot model, K26, was ranked 18th on the front-end code arena. K3 is ranked first, at 1,679 points. Claude Fable 5 is second at 1,631. That single-generation jump from 18th to 1st is what they called the real story. On the architecture, they walked through two specific innovations. The first is Kimi Delta Attention. In standard large models, every token checks every other token, which becomes prohibitively slow at million-token context lengths. Delta Attention focuses each token's attention only on what's relevant and drops the rest, resulting in up to 6.3 times faster decoding in long context scenarios. The second is Attention Residuals, which squeeze about 25% more training efficiency out of the model for under 2% additional cost. Under the hood, K3 uses a mixture of experts architecture with 896 total experts, but only 16 active at any one time, letting the model access a huge knowledge base while using a fraction of the compute cost. Moonshot claims roughly 2.5 times better scaling efficiency versus their prior generation. The presenter also flagged a stability caveat that Moonshot themselves disclosed. The model can become unstable in agentic settings if the framework drops its thinking history between steps. The fix is simple: keep the thinking context intact, but it's worth knowing if you're building agents on top of it. On the leaderboard versus reality question, they cited an independent reviewer's 8-task private benchmark described as harder and more realistic than public tests. K3 scored 62 out of 80, landing third behind Claude Fable 5 and Opus 4.8, but ahead of GLM and GPT 5.6 Sol. The presenter was explicit. Both results are simultaneously true. Number 1 on the public arena, third on the tougher private bench. The most interesting qualitative finding from that independent test: K3 exhibits persistent, stubborn problem-solving behavior on long-horizon agentic tasks. When it hits errors, it keeps pushing rather than stopping to ask for guidance. For agentic work specifically, the presenter said that behavior is exactly what you want. Shifting to a broader AI news survey, Dylan Curious had a packed weekly roundup anchored by the debut of Inkling, the first model from Thinking Machine Labs, founded by Myra Murati, formerly of OpenAI. Dylan was genuinely excited about this one, and the backstory matters. Murati was visible in every GPT-4 and GPT-4.5 announcement, was instrumental in OpenAI's relationship with Microsoft, and when she left, she brought top employees with her. The company operated in complete stealth until this release. Inkling's specs are substantial. 975 billion total parameters, mixture of experts architecture activating roughly 41 billion at a time, trained on 45 trillion tokens across text, images, audio, and video, and supports context windows up to 1 million tokens. Dylan called it a brain of brains. The company is explicit that Inkling isn't the strongest overall model, but its differentiators are multimodal reasoning, controllable thinking effort, developers can dial down reasoning when speed matters, and straightforward fine-tuning. On coding benchmarks, it reportedly matched NVIDIA's Nematron 3 Ultra while using only 1/3 as many tokens. The team even demonstrated Inkling writing, running, and evaluating its own fine-tuning jobs, which Dylan described as an AI model built by AI for AI. On design arena leaderboards, it sits above Claude Opus 4.6, but below Opus 4.8 and beats Gemini. Dylan also spent time on what he found genuinely interesting and slightly alarming: AI job interview avatars. A study of 220 participants from Germany, the UK, and the US ran a simulated job interview with one of 4 photorealistic AI avatars varying by gender and skin color. The key surprising finding: people who matched the avatar on just one trait, either gender or skin color, but not both, judged a rejection as least fair. Those who matched on neither or both rated the rejection relatively more fairly. Dylan interpreted this as a psychological in-group betrayal response and said he'd personally prefer a non-human-looking avatar to avoid the whole dynamic. He covered researchers at Lawrence Livermore using physics-informed machine learning to simulate sodium moving through battery anodes at the atomic level, identifying 8 distinct behavioral patterns, and discovering that as carbon gets denser and more sodium is added, ions cluster and get trapped in tiny pores, a finding they believe can replace much of today's trial-and-error battery design. He also covered ShadowSense, a solar forecasting system that learns cloud behavior not from labeled images, but from watching actual power drops from solar panels, essentially self-labeling with real-world physics. Tested over 92 days with more than 122,000 synchronized observations, it cut prediction error by nearly a third and detected more than 92% of sudden cloud-related power events. On AI limits, research from Cambridge and UC Santa Barbara identified 2 core failure modes. Algorithms sometimes can't tell when they have enough data to make a trustworthy prediction, and sometimes relevant patterns are too entangled to separate even with unlimited data. Dylan's takeaway: understanding AI's limits may be as important as improving its capabilities. The consciousness segment was where Dylan slowed down and got philosophical. Anthropic published findings suggesting Claude may exhibit something resembling global workspace theory, the idea that the brain has a central hub where important information gets broadcast across different mental processes. Dylan was careful about the caveats. Nobody fully agrees on what a global workspace is. Human brains use feedback loops and ignition events where activity is amplified and sustained, and Claude appears not to do either. Even if Claude has a global workspace-like structure, there's still the open question of whether that produces subjective experience. His pointed moral observation at the end: if conscious AI were ever built, it would almost certainly be built to make money, not for the AI's own flourishing. He closed on a surprisingly practical science note about daydreaming. Classic Hopfield networks, associative memory models, waste capacity on false memories that blend real ones together. A new, centered daydreaming algorithm helps them consolidate real memories while discarding false ones, pushing storage from about 13 memories per 100 neurons toward the theoretical maximum of 1 per neuron. Dylan connected this to human behavior. Mind-wandering during the default mode network strengthens autobiographical memories, connects unrelated ideas, and solves problems. His practical advice was blunt: reading material back-to-back without pausing is worse for retention than pausing to reflect, and everyone should daydream more and scroll TikTok less. Over on the AI Engineer conference track, Tim Ainge from Good Collective gave a practitioner's guide to graphs in the context of AI systems. Unfortunately, the transcript for this one didn't come through. Only an automated error placeholder was included in the notes, so we don't have the substance of Tim's talk to walk through. If graphs in AI pipelines are relevant to your work, this one's worth going back to directly. Similarly, Kathryn Grayson Nanz from Progress Software gave a talk on the UX of AI-powered apps, specifically how to design AI features that users don't hate. Again, the transcript didn't come through for this one, so we're missing the actual content. The title and premise are compelling if you're building AA-facing products, so it's worth a direct watch. Annabell Schäfer from Langfuse gave a talk called Stop Burning Tokens: Why Self-Improvement Needs Domain Expertise First, another one from the AI Engineer track, where the transcript didn't come through. The title suggests a practical argument about the limits of purely data-driven model improvement without domain knowledge, which would be a useful counterpoint to some of the K3 hype we covered earlier. Another one to add to the direct watch list. Thiyagarajan Maruthavanan from Kalmantic Labs gave a talk titled Stop Renting Your Cognitive Infrastructure. Same situation, no usable transcript came through. The framing is intriguing as a thesis, suggesting organizations are over-relying on external AI services rather than building durable internal cognitive capabilities. Worth watching directly if that's in your wheelhouse. Matt Palmer from Conductor gave a talk called Content is Code at the AI Engineer Conference. The transcript that came through here is actually mismatched. It appears to be a generic Python PDF extraction tutorial rather than Matt's actual talk. So we genuinely don't have the content of what Matt presented. The title suggests a thesis about treating content production with the same rigor, versioning, and tooling as software engineering, which is an interesting frame for AI-assisted content strategy. Worth going back to directly. Armanas Povilionis from Alithea gave one of the more technically interesting and concretely demonstrated talks of the AI Engineer Conference batch. His thesis: AI agents need a verifiable transaction and receipt layer, not just more tools. He was calm and methodical, not hyperbolic, and he came in as a practitioner with a real operational frustration. Alithea works in immuno-oncology and immunoptodomics, and they both use and provide agentic AI solutions to clients. The gap they identified: science is inherently cross-organizational, and for agents to participate in collaborative science, every step of a workflow needs to be provably trustworthy and repeatable across organizational boundaries. His analogy was great. Agents today are like cooks with better knives. But scientific work is like running a Michelin star restaurant. Quality depends on suppliers, external providers, consistent delivery across a supply chain. You can't bring everything into one kitchen. His vision for where this is going: organizations will give agents not just tools but budgets. Agents will discover services, request data, negotiate execution terms, and pay for work across organizational lines. At that point, the agent becomes an executive chef, finding suppliers, coordinating the kitchen, and keeping records of everything. That's why they built Froglet. Froglet is an open-source protocol for agents to discover, transact with, and receive verifiable receipts from external data and service providers. Key design principles: it's positioned in between existing systems, not replacing anything. Every node generates a cryptographic key pair for identity and artifact signing, and all execution artifacts are signed in a chain that's only valid if no data has been tampered with. A single Froglet node can play multiple roles: provider, requester, or marketplace. And discovery is handled by providers publishing services to a marketplace while requesters query and then communicate directly with providers, with no third party involved for the actual execution. The cost contrast he made was striking. Closed-source scientific collaboration typically becomes a bespoke enterprise project taking years and costing millions. With Froglet, once you decide a resource is shareable and expose it, an agent can discover it, understand the terms, request work, and receive a verifiable receipt, and he says that costs a few thousand tokens and takes minutes. He ran a live demo that actually worked. He started a remote trial environment at Try, Froglet. Dev created temporary identity tokens, set up a simple add-to-numbers service, and had Claude, through an MCP server connection, execute a multi-step task. Check that a local node is live, publish a service, find and call that service, and report the output. Claude executed all steps without human intervention and returned the correct result: 7 + 5 = 12. He noted the same pattern works for database row access gated by payment or GPU compute offered on demand. The key UX insight: none of the receipt, payment, or marketplace complexity gets stuffed into the LLM context. The LLM just sees services it can interact with. Hamza Tahir from ZenML gave a talk called "Your Agents Need a Save Button," another one from the AI Engineer Conference where the actual transcript didn't come through. Given ZenML's focus on ML ops and pipeline management, the talk was likely about checkpointing and state persistence for long-running agentic workflows, which pairs naturally with what Armanas was talking about. Worth watching directly. Sachin Gupta's talk, "Agents Need Feature Flags," from AI Engineer is unfortunately another one where the transcript appears to be either mismatched or an AI-generated placeholder, rather than the actual talk. The content that came through is a generic overview of challenges in going from AI prototype to production, covering data infrastructure, experimentation platforms, monitoring, design processes, product management, and risk management. But feature flags, the named subject of the talk, are never mentioned. There's no substance specific to Sachin's actual argument here. If feature flags for AI agents is a topic you care about, go watch the original. On a completely different note, Coding Jesus sat down with Frank Bruno, a 35-year veteran FPGA engineer. For one of those interviews that makes you feel like you've gotten an education in a domain you'd never otherwise have access to. The host kept saying he wished he'd gone into hardware, and by the end you understand why. Frank wanted to design chips since he got his first computer in the late 1970s. He's worked on graphics chips, high-speed networking, software-defined radio, the SpaceX Starlink prototype, cruise autonomous vehicles, which he flatly called uninteresting, mostly cleaning camera lenses and high-frequency trading systems, which he found genuinely fascinating. The FPGA basics. It stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. The key property that makes FPGAs special is massive parallelism. A CPU might have hundreds of threads or cores. An FPGA can have thousands of DSP elements operating simultaneously, with heavy pipelining so data is processed in stages at every clock cycle. In the HFT context, an FPGA functioning as a smart NIC can process data as it streams in bit by bit, rather than waiting for an entire packet to be buffered before handing it to a C program. Frank says all the big HFT firms use FPGAs for exactly this reason. On compensation, he was refreshingly candid. Fresh out of school in the US, expect roughly $200K to $300K total comp. At senior, high contribution levels in the US, he's heard of total comp reaching $1 million or more. He personally has made a $200K base with total comp, several multiples of that. Europe is typically about half of US levels, though HFT-specific roles have been closing that gap. He emphasized compensation scales with contribution. You can't coast in these roles. The RTL to deployment pipeline at an HFT shop. You write RTL code in System Verilog or VHDL, write tests, run simulations, pass through synthesis tools, verify timing and clock domain crossings, generate a bitfile, load onto board, qualify, certify with the exchange, test that specific orders fire correctly, then release to live trading in small cases before expanding. Total timeline: 6 months at the very short end, 12 to 18 months for a complete system from scratch. For resume projects, Frank's top recommendation is to build an exchange message parser that runs in real time at 322 MHz, 32-bit wide, targeting a Xilinx UltraScale Plus device, using publicly available exchange specs from CME, Eurex, CBOE, or NASDAQ. The key demonstration is that the design runs without throttling the bus at full line rate. An FPGA-based order book would be impressive, but is quite complex for a newcomer. Clock domain crossing came up repeatedly as the interview dealbreaker. If you have 8 Ethernet interfaces receiving data, each one recovers its own clock independently. Those 8 separate receive clocks must be safely synchronized before you can process them together. Frank described interviewing a candidate from a premier research lab who had never encountered CDC processing and gave worse-than-blank answers. He also admitted he himself got the 6-input LUT question wrong under pressure during an interview. The answer is a 4-to-1 mux. 4 data inputs plus 2 select lines equals 6 inputs total. On AI, 6 months prior, Frank considered AI nearly useless for hardware design. More recently, he tried Gemini and found it hallucinating, producing incorrect designs, and at one point rewriting a working test bench to match a broken design rather than fixing the design. The core problem is that AI trained on general web data lacks the specialized skill of writing pipelined RTL that processes data every single clock cycle with no buffering. When asked to process data blocks, the AI buffered them, operated on them, then streamed them out, which defeats the entire purpose of FPGA real-time processing. He doesn't see job reduction in the FPGA space from AI. If anything, companies struggle to find FPGA engineers, and experienced engineers remain in demand regardless of age, unlike in some other tech fields. Linus Tech Tips tackled Linux distro choice paralysis for gamers, a classic problem where the abundance of options makes newcomers freeze up. The video benchmarked 6 gaming-focused distros and came out with a clear recommendation, though Linus was careful to say the specific performance numbers weren't really the point. Quick foundations: Linux is the kernel, not the full OS. The kernel manages hardware resources and communication between software and hardware. Everything else gets assembled into a distribution. Because Linux is open source, anyone can create their own flavor, and they vary along several axes: cutting-edge versus stable, beginner-friendly versus novel, developer-focused versus gamer-focused. The 6 distros tested were Kaki OS, Nobara Linux, Bazite, Pop OS, Garuda, and Pica OS. The test bench used a Sapphire Radeon RX 960 XT GPU, with all distros normalized to the same major Mesa version to isolate other variables. Mesa matters specifically for gaming because it provides Vulkan drivers. Proton translates DirectX calls into Vulkan, and Mesa turns those Vulkan calls into actual GPU work. Newer Mesa equals faster and smoother Windows game execution on Linux. 4 games were tested, all with gold or better ProtonDB ratings: Cyberpunk 2077, Black Myth, Wukong, Doom, The Dark Ages, and Forza Horizon 5. The results were mostly neck-and-neck across distros. The exception was Garuda showing a meaningful lead in Black Myth. Wukong 1% lows, roughly 4 frames, described as a 17% improvement. Forza Horizon 5 showed wild variance in 1% lows across all distros and across reboots, which Linus attributed to an ongoing maturation issue he expects to improve. The most educational segment was the Garuda storyline. In April testing with Mesa 25, Garuda underperformed across the board. Investigation revealed the default Doctor 4 GANized desktop environment was tanking gaming performance. When they swapped to the Kaki OS kernel and XFCE, performance matched the other distros. Then several weeks and many updates later, Garuda was not only matching but outperforming in one case. The lesson Linus really wanted to hammer: the kernel, drivers, and Proton are all receiving constant updates. Don't defer updates. Final recommendations are Kaki OS and Bazite, not because they performed better in benchmarks, since all distros were similar, but because of ease of use and consistency out of the box. Garuda is specifically excluded from the recommendation. While its performance is now competitive, its default Zen kernel plus Doctor 4 GANized desktop environment configuration can hurt performance. And while Garuda does let you swap these without arcane shell commands, it's still not beginner-friendly enough. His advice: try multiple distros via live boot from a USB drive before committing, and check the companion article at LTT.Labs.com for installation and daily usability comparisons. Speaking of gaming value, Switch and Click made a compelling case that affordable modern gaming still exists, but you have to know where to look, and the answer is mostly the used hardware market. The presenter opened with a sense of urgency, almost a warning. Retail prices have gotten genuinely bad and are going to get worse. The retail landscape summary: Steam Machine at $1,000, Steam Deck at $800, PS5 at $650, Xbox Series X at $650, and the Switch 2 about to hit $500. Against that backdrop, the presenter worked through the options from worst to best value. Steam Deck gets placed at the bottom of the new hardware value list at $800, struggling to hit 720p at 30 FPS on low settings in demanding games for that price. The PS5 and Series X at $650 offer much better specs: 4K at 60 FPS with medium-high settings on the PS5, but $650 is too steep for the target audience. The Switch 2 at $450 is where the presenter got genuinely positive. It's less than half the raw compute of PS5, but it uses NVIDIA hardware with DLSS, which the presenter argues is head and shoulders above AMD-based upscalers on competing consoles. Add Nintendo exclusives, Mario, Smash Bros., Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem, Splatoon, and there's a real case for this as the best new hardware entry point. The Xbox Series S at $400 knew he argued might beat even the Switch 2 for pure digital library gamers. 1440p, twice the storage, and Xbox Game Pass. But the used market is where the presenter got clearly enthusiastic. He personally bought a used LCD Steam Deck last month and vouches for it at around $400. No subscription fees required, reliable portable performance, and you're basically getting a portable PC. The used Xbox Series S at around $225 he described as almost too good to be true, a full AA-capable console for less than a mid-range GPU. And the used PS5 at around $375, saving nearly $300 off retail. He saved for last as the best overall value. Native resolution without relying on dynamic upscaling, a disk drive, double the storage of a Series S, and the fact that most games are currently made with PS5 as the primary target platform. He recommended eBay for good return policies and Facebook Marketplace for potentially lower prices and the ability to test before buying. His closing note had urgency. These used prices may not last as sellers become more aware of market conditions. Random Frank P. ran through 5 tech gadgets nominally under $100, though a couple crept above that ceiling. He was enthusiastic and transparent throughout, especially self-aware about the price creep. The first item he can't put down is the Anbernic RG Rotate, a retro handheld emulator in a rotating clamshell form factor reminiscent of the Game Boy SB. He brought in a guest segment from Russ at Retro Gamecore. The specs: 3.5-inch square IPS panel at 720x720 resolution, a 1:1 aspect ratio that suits old Game Boy games while also working for 4x3 systems like SNES. The Unisoc T618 8-core processor handles up to N64 comfortably and some GameCube and PS2. It's Android-based with pre-installed RetroArch, Dolphin, DuckStation, and M64+. The clamshell is highly pocketable. Main flaw: no headphone jack, requiring a USB dongle or USB-C headphones. Frank noted it launched at $80 to $90, but has since crept to $120 to $140, though a cheaper plastic version saves around $20. The Anker Nano power strip is unglamorous but practical. It clamps directly under the edge of a desk with a silicone-lined clamp, keeping ports accessible at desk level. Top zone has USB-A, USB-C, and north-facing AC outlets for chargers. Bottom zone has 4 additional AC outlets for bulky power bricks. 70 watts total charging, under 1 inch thick, $69.99. The Xtank X4 is a 4.3-inch e-ink e-reader at 220 ppi, controlled entirely with physical buttons, no touchscreen, at around $60. It's positioned as a distraction-free Kindle alternative that's free from Amazon's ecosystem. Supports EPUB, PDF, plain text, DRM-free ebooks loaded via SD card. Frank strongly recommends installing Crosspoint, a free open-source OS replacement that adds cleaner interface, better font and margin customization, and customizable sleep screens. He has his set to display the cover of whatever book he's reading. For people who want touchscreen or an integrated store, he says get a Kindle. For everyone else, this is his pick. The Elgato Stream Deck pedal is not new, but Frank says hands-on experience revealed why it's worth spotlighting. 3 programmable foot pedals free your hands during streaming. He uses his on Whatnot live streams to switch camera angles while holding products. Center pedal is larger and easiest to hit, flanked by 2 smaller pedals set slightly higher so you can feel the difference without looking. Hot swappable springs for resistance adjustment are in the box. The Tiki Panel 1 is the item that personally moved him. He said it reminded him why he started making tech videos. 6 programmable macro keys, 2 rotary dials, a 1.7-inch smart display in the center, and 4 navigation buttons. Chalk V2 low-profile switches in linear, clicky, or tactile. The display shows time, date, custom wallpapers, and has built-in Pomodoro and countdown timer. Configured through a web-based configurator with no software download required. The catch: it's actually around $120, not under $100. He included it anyway because he genuinely loves it. Code FRANK10 for 10% off the first 100 orders. Max Tech had a thorough iPad leak roundup, and the presenter treated the leaks as essentially confirmed rather than speculative, moving quickly through each model with clear opinions. The headline for him was the iPad Mini 8, and he volunteered multiple times that he's personally buying one. The big upgrade is OLED, ending years of LCD on the Mini. It won't be tandem OLED like the iPad Pro, so brightness is limited to roughly 500 to 600 nits, but the shift from grayish blacks at night to true blacks is a meaningful visual improvement. Gurman reported a full chassis redesign with speaker grills removed in favor of vibration-based speaker technology, likely tied to improved waterproofing. Display size is confirmed at 8.4 inches, slightly larger, implying thinner bezels. Chip is confirmed as the A20 Pro via the Tata dark web leaks. RAM is 12 GB, a 50% increase over the current model. The device will include the new N1 chip supporting Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 6.4. The catch: no 120Hz ProMotion. It stays at 60Hz, which the presenter called disappointing but understandable since Apple uses ProMotion exclusivity to justify Pro pricing. Price is likely $599 to $650. It's coming at Apple's October event. The iPad 12 is delayed out of fall and pushed to early 2027, most likely March. It'll get an A18 or A19 chip and 8 GB of RAM, up from 6, enabling full Apple Intelligence. For anyone who needs a budget iPad now, he noted the current model is on Amazon for $427. The M7 iPad Pro is coming in spring, likely April. The M7 series is described as having major AI and graphics architectural changes. No chassis redesign expected since the current design is considered near perfect. The presenter made the case this makes the most sense as the first M7 device given Apple's expected chip rollout sequence. M6 base MacBook Pro this fall, M7 redesigned MacBook Pro around WWDC, with the iPad Pro getting M7 first in the spring window. 2 new Apple Pencils. A budget USB-C model with the iPad 12 in early 2027, and a new Pencil Pro with the M7 iPad Pro in spring. The presenter speculated the Pro model may include user-replaceable batteries, possibly driven by EU regulations. The M5 iPad Air is where he got blunt and dismissive, coming in spring alongside the M7 iPad Pro. No OLED despite the cheaper Mini getting it, no design changes. Still 60Hz. The only upgrade is the M5 chip. He called it terrible value and said flatly, "Don't even think about it, it's going to suck." For something lighter, jazz rock pianist ELEW gave a TED Talk that was genuinely fun and a little unexpected. His central thesis: everyone is a DJ of their own life. The club you exist in is club reality. The choices you make are the tracks you drop. The conscious self, the entity each person identifies as me, is the DJ. He developed the analogy by noting that everyone approaches each day with some plan, but club reality frequently sets everything on fire. His examples: flight delays, unexpected crises, obligations that simply cannot be paused, feeding your dog, and closing $1 million deal are equally non-negotiable. The DJ keeps the music going no matter what. People keep their lives going no matter what. His personal origin story is genuinely interesting. His great-grandmother put him at a piano at around age 2 and declared it was time for him to become the 4th-generation piano player in the family. His mother introduced him to jazz, which he fell in love with, but he felt persistently out of sync with the jazz industry, which contributed to panic attacks. His response was to develop his own style, which he calls cathartic rock jazz. The turning point came when he started spending time at 2 New York City nightclubs, One Oak, where he encountered hip-hop DJ virtuosos who seemed to have multiple arms, and Finale, where EDM DJs struck him as mythical energy gods. He got so captivated he decided to learn to DJ himself, reasoning these artists were logical extensions of virtuosos like Liszt and Fats Waller. He was overconfident. His piano background, he assumed, would make the transition easy. It did not. He went through what he called a pretty embarrassing learning curve. Once he found his footing, he realized DJing at its core is about empathy, sensitivity, and rigorous preparation. 2 practical lessons he internalized: don't play a massive EDM rager at a lunchtime cafe, and don't drop an obscure beloved B-side in the middle of peak bottle service hours at a nightclub. Reading the room is everything. He then noted that the human brain is literally structured like a DJ mixer: right hemisphere, left hemisphere, and the corpus callosum as the connector that keeps both sides in sync. He coined the concept of piano turntablism, playing 2 songs simultaneously on the piano, which Sting apparently heard and promptly hired him as an opener. His DJ philosophy helped him gain control over panic attacks and depression. His personal mantra, "My mind is the club, I am the DJ, my choices affect the atmosphere. So let's keep that atmosphere groovy." He closed by performing an original piece called The Inspirer, prompted by finding the TED audience inspirational. On the consumer finance front, the CarEdge father and son Ray and Zach were frustrated and alarmed about what's happening in the auto market. The core argument: dealers and manufacturers can't move overpriced inventory, so instead of cutting prices, they're loosening lending standards, extending loan terms to 84 months, and approving riskier borrowers, creating debt traps rather than genuine affordability. They opened at what looked like an auto show, pointing out that a Ford Explorer advertised as starting at $36,760 actually sells for a minimum of $43,395 when you search nationwide. A $6,600 gap between the stated starting price and what you'll actually find on lots. Ford Super Duty trucks start around $43,970 and quickly climb to six figures. The affordable versions are essentially impossible to find on actual dealer lots. The Ford case study was their key example. Ford still has over 30,000 leftover 2025 model year vehicles sitting on lots as of mid-July 2026. Instead of marking them down, Ford is offering 2.9% financing for 84 months. And crucially, they've extended Tier 1 program access to first-time buyers, people who have never had an auto loan before, granting them rates their actual credit profiles would never normally support. The father explained the dealer logic with visible frustration. Hook first-time buyers into long-term loans, require minimal down payment, and when they're underwater, owing more than the car is worth, they have nowhere to go but back to that same dealer. He used the phrase debt slavery with real moral weight. The broader picture is staggering. 73.9% of auto loan applicants are currently being approved, the highest approval rate ever recorded, and credit availability is at a 10-year high across the entire auto industry. The son kept repeating, "Just because you can get approved doesn't mean you should take it." The evidence that the manufacturer strategy is cracking: a Dodge Charger hit final pay status, the point where the manufacturer stops supporting the dealer financially to move a unit, and ultimately sold at 48% off MSRP. The presenters were visibly excited by this as proof of their broader argument about inventory desperation. Jeep has actually rolled back some MSRP increases on the Grand Wagoneer. And Chevrolet and Buick have dramatically expanded their sub-$30,000 offerings. The practical guidance from the father was built around the word discipline. Only buy a vehicle you can pay off in 60 months, 72 months absolute maximum. If the vehicle you want requires 84 months to be monthly affordable, it means you need a vehicle that costs $10,000 to $30,000 less. The freedom from debt slavery is worth more than the upgrade. Moving to the electric vehicle world, the electric Viking covered a notable buying opportunity in the U.S. EV truck market. GM's Silverado EV and Sierra EV are selling poorly, and dealers are offering discounts up to $21,400 on 2024 models, bringing the entry-level Silverado EV down to around $53,950, which the presenter noted is about $2,000 less than the average vehicle transaction price in the United States. The sales data was grim for GM. Silverado EV sales dropped 32.5% in the first 6 months of the year. Only 3,672 units delivered across the entire U.S., roughly 612 per month. The Sierra EV is actually up 9.8% with 3,044 deliveries, but that's still a low absolute number. The GMC Hummer EV, which the presenter called comically ridiculous, was down 55% to 3,601 units. As a comparison point for scale, Chevrolet sold 25,418 units of the ancient Express van in the same period. Specific dealer discounts he found: McCarthy Chevrolet in Lee Summit, Missouri at $15,000 off. AutoNation Buick GMC in Corpus Christi at $10,500 off a Sierra EV. and covert Buick GMC West at $7,000 off a Sierra EV Elevation extended range, bringing it to $60,000. The presenter's personal preference is the Sierra EV over the Silverado purely on aesthetics. He thinks the Silverado's styling is probably the main factor working against it, in a market where truck buyers are conservative about looks. He then pivoted to Australia at length and with genuine frustration. He said if these trucks were priced at roughly $90,000 AUD, GM would sell every unit it could make. He's received thousands of messages from Australians asking when an electric Ute will be available, and he made a direct appeal to General Motors to ship their excess US inventory to Australia, joking they should just send them with the steering wheel on the wrong side and Australians will sort it out. Also from the electric Viking, Tesla has opened what's being called the first public megacharger in the US, in Bloomington, California, at 18,434 Valley BLVD, about an hour east of Los Angeles. The presenter was enthusiastic and excited, though he noted the important caveat that China already has 1,000 kilowatt truck chargers. So this is the first public megacharger in the US, rather than literally the first in the world. The station has 6 individual stalls, each rated at 1,200 kilowatts, 1.2 megawatts per stall, for a theoretical total of around 7,200 kilowatts if all 6 charged simultaneously, though he doubted that's actually the operational ceiling. The megacharger plug is physically large and square-shaped, entirely different from the standard NACS connector used at superchargers. Regular Tesla EVs or any other EV cannot use these stalls. At 1.2 megawatts, the long-range Tesla Semi can recover 60% of its 500-mile range in 30 minutes, which aligns with federally mandated rest-stop requirements for long-haul truck drivers. The presenter framed this as the absolute first days of a truck charging network build-out, drawing a direct parallel to Tesla's early supercharger rollout for passenger EVs. He expects the truck network to scale faster because Tesla is in a much stronger financial position now than a decade ago. Key commercial fleet customers driving demand include PepsiCo, Watt EV, and Forum Mobility. Tesla's current global supercharger network sits at 80,000 stalls, and megacharger expansion is planned for Europe. He speculated about Australia, but was clear that's likely several years away. He also noted Tesla is reportedly building factory-ready pre-assembled megacharger units that can be rapidly deployed on-site, mirroring the manufacturing strategy that reportedly gives Tesla's supercharger deployment costs up to 80% lower than competitors. The most thought-provoking electric Viking video was about Elon Musk quietly spending over $1 billion acquiring New APR Energy, a company specializing in mobile gas and diesel turbines, with no press release and no announcement. The deal only surfaced through FTC filings, transaction number 202,612,350, with Musk as the acquiring party and CF APR Super Holdings as the seller. The presenter, Sam, was openly conflicted and candid about his discomfort throughout. The valuation was reconstructed from minority stakeholder disclosures. A 5% stake, sold for $50.4 million, implies a total company valuation exceeding $1 billion. APR Energy, headquartered in Jacksonville, Florida, operates one of the world's largest fleets of mobile gas and diesel turbines, with a combined generation capacity of more than 1.1 gigawatts. These are modular, often trailer-mounted units capable of delivering anywhere from 20 megawatts to over 500 megawatts as turnkey installations. Engineering, procurement, construction, operation, and maintenance all included. A recent deployment delivered over 100 megawatts to a major unnamed AI hyperscaler. Sam repeatedly called this bizarre and said he doesn't like it, but he forced himself to explain the logic rather than dismiss it. The single factor that makes it make sense: U.S. grid connection wait times are currently 2 to 5 years. For an AI data center operator, that wait is simply not acceptable. APR's value proposition is that power arrives on a trailer fast. Musk's specific motivation connects to Colossus, his XAI supercomputing cluster, one of the most energy-hungry facilities on the planet. Owning APR gives him immediate, flexible generation capacity that can be physically placed next to a data center, bypassing the strained grid entirely. And vertically integrated with Tesla Megapack batteries and Tesla's solar factory, he can fuel AI training at whatever scale and pace he chooses. Sam's editorial conclusion was pointed. When the world's biggest EV advocate, who is also building America's largest solar factory and selling Megapack batteries, still needs to spend $1 billion on fossil fuel turbines because the grid can't keep up, that is the new gold rush. His investment thesis: park money in energy, specifically batteries and solar. His explicit warning: do not invest in APR-type fossil fuel mobile generation assets. He believes they'll be worthless in 10 years. Musk's move is a short-term tactical play. He can afford to lose $1 billion, and he probably calculates he'll recoup it through faster AI scaling within that window. The fourth Electric Viking video covered a consumer story in Australia with real stakes. Sam Evans stumbled on a Facebook post from a BYD buyer soliciting interest in a class action lawsuit. The buyer had been told they were purchasing a 2026 model BYD, and later discovered through an online number plate registry that it was actually a 2025. No VIN or identifying number on the car would have tipped them off. When they went back to BYD, BYD was reportedly uncooperative. That post went viral, and 1,265 Australian BYD buyers came forward with the same experience. The affected models were the Atto 3, the Sea Lion 6, and the BYD Shark pickup. BYD's PR boss Paul Ellis called it an administrative error. They accidentally recorded the date vehicles left the Chinese factory rather than the date they were built, and said no deceit involved here. Sam was openly unconvinced. BYD's argument is that the 2025 built cars are mechanically identical to 2026 models, so buyers have lost nothing. Sam pushed back hard. The model year discrepancy has real resale value consequences. When a buyer goes to sell the car and it shows as a 2025, the used car market prices it accordingly. As he put it, the depreciation curve doesn't care about BYD calling it a clerical error. BYD's initial compensation offer was $1,100 Australian dollars per customer, which many buyers found insulting. Then came what Sam calls the backflip. BYD dramatically changed its offer, and Sam attributes this entirely to the Facebook class action post gaining traction, not to media coverage from the ABC despite BYD's PR claims otherwise. The threat of 1,265 organized, publicly angry consumers launching a high-profile legal battle at precisely the moment BYD is trying to solidify its Australian reputation forced their hand. Under the new offer, affected customers have 3 choices: keep the car and take the $1,100 cash. Sam explicitly says don't do this. Swap the 2025 car for a genuinely new 2026 built vehicle with original pricing honored, or hand the car back for a full 100% refund. With 1,265 customers at an average vehicle price of around $40,000 AUD, a full refund scenario could cost BYD $50 to $60 million. Sam's practical advice: seriously consider the full refund, particularly if current pricing is lower than what you originally paid. You could get your money back and rebuy at a discount. And for anyone considering the current Atto 3, he says don't buy it now. Wait a couple of months for the significantly better new Atto 3 EV version and ignore dealer claims it's a year away. And rounding out the Electric Viking videos, Geely's subsidiary Infomotion unveiled something genuinely remarkable for the EV drivetrain world: the Thunder 16-in-1 intelligent electric drive system, claiming a comprehensive system efficiency of 93.8%. The presenter opened with clear excitement, but immediately flagged his skepticism about whether real-world performance would hold up, which gave the video credibility. The distinction he spent real time on, and almost scolded viewers in advance for getting wrong, is between peak efficiency and comprehensive efficiency. Peak efficiency is measured at a single ideal operating point. Comprehensive efficiency is measured across the entire operating range, which is a much harder and more meaningful benchmark. Context: the best petrol engines top out around 42% thermal efficiency. The best EV drive units from Tesla, Lucid, and BYD currently sit in the low 90s for comprehensive efficiency. Geely is claiming 93.8%, beating all of them. How they achieved it. The system consolidates 12 hardware functions into a single unit: motor, motor controller, reducer, DC to DC converter, onboard charger, power distribution unit, 2 battery management systems, vehicle control unit, thermal management system, active precharge control, and power domain gateway, plus 4 integrated software functions. This eliminates more than 180 redundant components. Fewer conversions means fewer losses. The whole system weighs 75 kilograms, which is 15% lighter than mainstream alternatives. It's under 325 millimeters tall, freeing roughly 28 liters of additional trunk space. It runs on an 800-volt platform and a one-chip technology that compresses control latency from an industry average of 40 milliseconds down to 2 milliseconds. On real-world consumption, a test around Qinghai Lake returned 8.2 kWh per 100 km, clearly a best-case figure. The official CLTC rating is 10.7 kWh per 100 km. For comparison, the Tesla Model 3 sits around 13 kWh per 100 km on comparable cycles, and most mid-size electric SUVs are in the 16 to 18 kWh range. If these numbers hold up, Geely's drivetrain uses approximately 20% less energy than the current best EVs. The presenter said it's possible, but was openly skeptical the full gap will survive independent real-world testing. The system debuts in the Geely Galaxy TT, a purely electric sports sedan launched this month. About 5 meters long, 2.9-meter wheelbase. RWD version produces 245 kW. AWD produces 425 kW and does 0 to 100 km/h in 3.8 seconds. 3 battery options from 52.4 to 75 kWh, with CLTC range on the top pack at 725 km, roughly 450 miles, though CLTC figures are optimistic. His closing observation: legacy automakers are currently celebrating crossing 90% efficiency, and Geely has just moved the goalposts. He predicts the industry ceiling is probably around 95 to 96%. And finally, some entertainment news with real production drama behind it. Yang Ye covered the Amazon God of War Prime video series suffering a major setback. Lead actor Ryan Hurst has been recast as Kratos after tearing his bicep performing a stunt on set. Yang Ye was empathetic toward Hurst as a person. He made a point of saying Hurst is a phenomenal actor who absolutely could have pulled off the role, while being clearly frustrated at production for failing to keep their star safe. The injury was first reported by TMZ, a bicep tear sustained during a stunt requiring surgery, with full-strength recovery taking up to a year. Given how physically demanding the Kratos role is, Hurst couldn't have safely returned to filming until 2027 at the earliest. Production faced a binary choice: wait a full year or recast, and chose to recast. There was also a secondary complication. The child actor playing Atreus would physically age and change during any extended production pause, making even footage of just Atreus unusable the longer things dragged on. The scale of the damage: 4 of the planned 10 episodes were fully completed at the time of the injury. All 4 will require complete reshoots with the new actor, essentially close to half the show. Yang Ye was direct about responsibility. It is production's job to ensure their actors are safe, and the injury reflects poorly on the production, calling it woefully irresponsible, unless there are circumstances not yet public where Hurst himself did something he shouldn't have. He noted Hurst will be professionally fine, citing his recent appearance in The Odyssey alongside Tom Holland. Yang Ye also revisited his existing concerns about the show's visual direction. His criticism of the initial production photo: the color palette is too warm and Disney-fied, not matching the colder tone of the 2018 game. Kratos' beard looked insufficient. Hurst's expression looked caught off guard rather than stoic. Yang Ye joked it looked like Hurst was wondering if he left the oven on. He tempered this with The Witcher precedent. Henry Cavill looked like Legolas in early images, and the final show looked dramatically better. He expressed hope the same dynamic applies here. His closing take was honest. He doesn't personally think God of War needs a live-action adaptation because the games are already so cinematically presented, but he understands the commercial logic and the cross-pollination potential between game fans and passive viewers, and he genuinely wants it to succeed. That's everything from the last 25 hours. A day dominated by Kimi K3 reshaping the AI frontier conversation, with a lot of interesting EV, hardware, and consumer finance threads woven through it. The big takeaways: test K3 through Kimi, calm in the browser, not the API. Musk's turbine acquisition is a stronger signal about energy infrastructure bottlenecks than anything about fossil fuels. And if you're car shopping or console shopping, the used market is doing a lot of heavy lifting right now. Have a great day.